how Microsoft is halting its construction of a $3.3 billion data center, explaining digital transformation to your grandma, and Workday versus S4 HANA. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to talk about here in episode 205 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 205. This is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation. It's a tech-agnostic view of the world of digital transformation. This is a podcast that comes out every Wednesday. You can find new episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also subscribe on your favorite platform, whatever platform you prefer to listen or watch on. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here again today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great show planned here today. We're excited for the audience involvement as well. Got a lot of topics we're going to cover today. We're going to start off with some social media questions we've received. We'll get to those answers here in a moment, just answering some social media questions. And then we are going to also get into some newsworthy topics. One in particular is building on a topic we covered last week. We talked about how Microsoft is investing heavily in a new data center for its AI efforts, its open AI efforts. And now we're going to talk about how they are now cutting back on that investment that we just talked about recently. So we'll talk about that here today. And then we're also going to talk about a big collaboration coming between SAP and IBM. And then later in the show, we'll have our first guest, Bret Robinson from Worx Global. He's going to be on the show, and he's going to help me explain digital transformation to our grandmothers. So we're going to try and simplify the concept of digital transformation and talk about what it means and take some of these really complex topics that we typically talk about in this podcast. And we're going to try and simplify it in a way that a grandmother could understand, a grandparent, or any other layperson for that matter, someone who's not in our space. I don't know about you, Darian, but people ask me all the time, what exactly do you do? What does digital transformation mean? What does technology consulting mean? And sometimes it can be hard to answer in a real simple way. So that's what we're going to try and do here today. And then later in the show, after that interview, we'll talk about a comparison between Workday and SAP S4 HANA and how to determine which of those two ERP systems is right for you, assuming one of them is right for you, by the way. There's obviously a lot more options out there than just SAP or Workday, but that is a common comparison that a lot of organizations make. So we're going to sort of talk about the differences between those two. But before we get to all the stuff we have coming up on the show, let's start off with some social media questions we have received, Darian.
Yeah, this first one is about Workday. So it is Workday even an ERP system? Does it meet the basic tenets to qualify it to be referred to as an ERP system?
Yes, we get that question all the time. And I think for the ERP purists out there, and I know there are probably several listening right now, I would say you're technically correct. Workday is technically not a complete ERP system, although I will say it's becoming more and more of a real full-blown ERP system. One is through its own organic expansion of capabilities. You know, it started off as a HR technology, and then they've added financials to the mix. Now they do some inventory management. It's still not going to be a good fit for a big manufacturing company, a complex manufacturing company, or a big complex supply chain. But for a back office function that covers finance, accounting, HR, maybe some basic inventory management, Workday can be a good option. And by the way, Workday also now partners or has a joint venture with Salesforce and the whole Force platform. So now if you want to round out the capabilities of Workday, you can do that through its joint venture partnership with Salesforce, which is not just a CRM system. It's a whole platform of third-party applications built on the Salesforce platform. So that could be a way to get you closer to a full-blown ERP. But I think in this space, though, honestly, I think it's less important to focus on, well, is that really ERP or is that some other category? Honestly, the categorization of technology doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of, does that technology do what you need it to do? And if it doesn't, is there a better fit out there? And or is there another technology that you could deploy in parallel in conjunction with that one to make it more of a complete ERP system?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we'll get more into Workday versus S/4HANA later, but I want to ask the second question here. It's, we can transform technology, but the end user transformation is the biggest challenge. How do you mitigate this?
Yeah, I totally agree. First of all, end user transformation is it's sort of the connector between what technology could do and the way things are today in your organization. It's the user adoption that connects the dots between the two. Just putting the technology in place doesn't really do you any good. It gives you an opportunity to connect the dots, but if there's nothing connected there in terms of technology and user adoption, then you've just wasted a ton of money on the technology. So I think the user adoption is arguably even more important than the technology. And I think, if assuming organizations have limited time, limited budget, limited resources, which most organizations do, then you've got to be thinking about how do we maybe divert more attention to the user adoption, even if it means we have to scale back some of the technology. Because if you scale back some of the technology, invest more heavily in user adoption, and you do that really well, you're probably going to get a lot more business value out of that scenario than if you invest a ton of money in technology, but not enough in your user adoption. Then you're just going to end up with a bunch of shelfware that doesn't work for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we had some great questions today, but I'm really eager actually to get into this first article of the day. It kind of plays on, if you guys listened to the episode last week, one of the articles about how Microsoft was or is investing $80 billion in AI enablement data centers. But then recently they came out with another announcement saying that they were actually pausing one of the data centers they were developing. So Microsoft, yes, has temporarily paused the construction of a $3.3 billion data center in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. The company is reassessing the project scope and design in light of recent technology advancements. This process, they said, could take up to several months, and they wouldn't continue construction until they have everything finalized. So this data center was reportedly intended to support OpenAI's development of advanced AI technologies, including the cutting-edge supercomputer. This pause comes amid reports that OpenAI has been seeking to renegotiate its deal with Microsoft for increased computing power at a lower cost. Additionally, some of Microsoft's executives have expressed concerns about the company's dependence on OpenAI for AI technology. So those are some reasons behind it, but I kind of want to get your take on this, Eric. What do you think Microsoft's decision, or what made them make this decision to, pause the data center project? What do you think this indicates about their strategy?
I don't know. I think it's really interesting because it just, it's sort of like back-to-back news flashes, that are pretty dramatically different. So I honestly don't know what it means. I mean, do they outline any of that in the article of sort of the rationale? You mentioned potential over-dependency on OpenAI. Is there something else behind it besides that?
Well, from the articles I read, I think a part of it definitely was from OpenAI seeking to renegotiate the deal with Microsoft at a lower cost. So I'm sure they're probably trying to work through what that actually looks like before maybe spending all of this money for OpenAI.
Yeah, makes sense. And knowing what that future holds and what the full potential of the partnership is, I guess that could be a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. With this, how might reassessing the project's scope and design affect Microsoft's ability to compete in the AI market?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got to figure this out pretty quick, because I think that Microsoft has a advantage in that relationship now with OpenAI. If for some reason that becomes splintered or severed, that relationship, then it sort of changes Microsoft's role potentially in the artificial intelligence arms race that we seem to be in right now. So be curious to see where it goes. I don't know what the other option would be or what other options Microsoft might have, but or unless they just want more control, I guess that could be part of it. Maybe they want to create their own AI model where they've got more control. I don't know. I'm not sure what their long-term thinking is or what their long-term options are that they're considering.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because you think of their competitors like Google, AWS, and Meta that could definitely, leverage this pause and take advantage of whatever they're pausing and why they're pausing. And like you said, kind of take over in the AI space or race right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. Definitely be curious to see how that unfolds. Who knows? By the time we do next week's podcast, there might be new breaking news as it relates to
Yeah,
the Reds. So we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens.
exactly. They might restart it again and we'll have
Yeah,
to
exactly.
let everybody know. So I don't know. It's really interesting. Like we said, we talked about it last week and then this week, a completely different story. But in the article, they did say that they wanted to, continue with their plan of investing 80 billion in data centers. But what do you think about their timeline and how, this pause could definitely, if you're taking months off, how could that influence that $80 billion getting spent in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it's things are moving so fast in the space that any sort of speed bump or pivot that an organization makes, which anyone's going to have to at times make pivots and adjustments and change direction, change course, or whatever. That happens, of course, but the reality is when it does happen, as fast as things are changing in the world of AI, it could set you back. I mean, just one little stumble or one little delay could set you back, especially with so much money getting poured into AI right now and so much acceleration in the advancement and the adoption of AI right now. It's sort of like everyone's trying to race to have that lead pole position or whatever in the AI space right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, something that we'll definitely have to keep our eye on and come back to if there is any more announcements with it. But for now, we'll go on to our next article of the day. And this is a big collaboration that's coming soon between two tech giants, SAP and IBM. They're teaming up to launch a new cloud solution designed for businesses running SAP S/4HANA software on IBM's Power System architecture. This new offering is expected to roll out in the second quarter of this year. So, what's, I guess, the big deal about this? It's all about making cloud adoption easier for enterprises by combining SAP RISE managed application services with IBM's Power virtual server infrastructure. They're creating a streamlined way for businesses to mitigate their existing SAP, or sorry, not mitigate, for businesses to migrate their existing SAP workloads to the cloud. So obviously this gives companies more flexibility and scalability that they need to keep up with changing business demands while also leveraging IBM's reputation for performance and reliability. With this, Eric, what do you think about SAP and IBM aiming to achieve this joint cloud offering?
I think it makes sense from a couple different perspectives. One is SAP and IBM have historically been pretty close in terms of especially on the services side. IBM has been a big system integrator of SAP products over the years, and so this is a way for them to potentially further or deepen that relationship that they've had over the years. But I also think it also points to like what we talked about in the opening segment with Microsoft and its invest on and off investments in its data centers. It just shows that there's so much money required to scale up to provide cloud offerings and AI offerings to customers that even some big technology companies struggle to do it on their own. And that's why you see so much collaboration. That's why you see the rise of these hyperscalers like AWS and Microsoft Azure and others, where it's these giant tech companies that have the resources to scale. They have an advantage, but even they have trouble, hyperscaling to the speed at which they need to. And so I think that's another indicator of it. The fact that you have SAP and IBM sort of joining forces, when in theory, either one of them could, you would think might be big enough for them to go pursue it on their own. But obviously they're seeing strength in numbers and strength and even more scale than they could accomplish on their own. So I think we're going to see this continue for some time now, where you're going to see advantages fall to the really big players that can invest in this sort of scale quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And what challenges do you think companies might face when migrating their SAP workloads to the IBM Power Systems cloud?
Well, the biggest one that comes to mind is that now you've got two parties, two vendors responsible for your overall solution. And anytime you have more than one, you start to get the finger pointing, potentially the blame game of, if the SAP software is not working, is it really an SAP issue, or is it an issue with IBM's infrastructure, or vice versa? I could see that turning into a situation where IBM's blaming SAP and SAP's blaming IBM for any issue a customer might have with, their scaled up cloud solution in the SAP environment. So I think that's probably the biggest one, is just knowing who's accountable for what, and potentially ensuring. I'm not sure how it'll work in terms of like a one throat to choke, or contractually, is it one party you're contracting with? Like, is SAP the party of or the provider of cloud solutions, and they just happen to subcontract or partner with IBM to deliver it, or is the customer responsible for managing both of those relationships? And those are two very different things. I suppose it just depends on how they structure the deals with customers, but that would be a big concern that I would have if I were a CIO or a buyer of an organization looking at this as a possible solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And one big question I have with this is, do you think this offering will accelerate cloud adoption for legacy SAP customers that maybe haven't gone to the cloud yet?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't think it will materially affect that adoption, because I don't think the issue is whether or not SAP or one of its partners can provide infrastructure and scale to support cloud adoption. Although behind the scenes, that may be a real concern that SAP has, but I don't think most customers we deal with, most clients we deal with, they're not concerned with, can SAP handle the infrastructure to give us a cloud solution? It's more, can the cloud solution meet our needs? And do we have the flexibility we need with the cloud application suite from SAP? Do we have enough flexibility to be able to migrate from, especially for legacy SAP customers that are using ECC or some other legacy SAP system where they were able to heavily customize that technology, now to move from that heavily customized legacy SAP environment to S/4HANA Cloud powered by or fueled by IBM. I think the real issue there is usability, flexibility, functionality, and that's not really anything to do with what IBM's providing here. It has more to do with, can Cloud S/4HANA meet the needs of the organization?
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. I mean, that's something that we've talked about a lot on here, is that, deadline that's coming in 2027. So pretty soon. And with that, I'm sure they're trying to, get more customers to the cloud, and maybe these partnerships they see will help that. Who really knows what they're thinking, I guess. But Eric, with this partnership, do you think that we'll see more joint offerings like this in the industry going forward? And if so, do you have any predictions for what companies might partner up next?
I don't have an answer to your second part of your question as far as which companies I honestly, I'd probably be better off or have better luck just guessing than actually putting thought into it, because I don't think any of us have any real idea who may or may not partner here. I think we'll see a lot of competitors become friendly, and I think there'll be a lot more collaboration. That's the interesting thing about AI right now, is there's so much collaboration between different companies and competitors. So it seems like a pretty limitless set of opportunities. But what was your first question? I remember thinking I could probably answer, but now I forgot what the question was. The first part of
just if you see like more joint offerings like this in the industry going forward. So,
yeah,
but you answered that kind of.
Yeah, I didn't mean to, but yeah, the joint offerings I think will continue, because like I was saying before, in the example of the SAP versus IBM, or the SAP IBM relationship, IBM is able to provide scale faster than SAP can on their own. That's why a lot of even big companies are using AWS too, because Amazon Web Services, which is what AWS stands for, they've figured out and cracked the code on how to provide mass scale for companies that need cloud infrastructure. And so, even if you're a bigger software vendor or a bigger IT shop for a non-technology company, I mean, why would you build your own infrastructure if you've got someone who can provide it for you effectively and cost efficiently? So I think it's going to continue for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question about this topic. What do you think will determine whether or not this collaboration is successful?
Well, I think actually your question earlier, the answer to your question earlier might be a good indicator, is in terms of, do more customers now feel comfortable moving to SAP Cloud because of the IBM relationship? I don't think it will, but maybe I'm wrong. If I am wrong, then that would be a good indicator that's a good fit. But I think, honestly, the relationship between SAP and IBM probably benefits SAP and IBM more than it benefits customers, or at least the perceived benefit. Because I think IBM is just going to provide more scale and potentially more cost effectiveness than SAP could do on their own. So, which I suppose indirectly would benefit customers as well to some degree, but I just don't think it's going to fuel the adoption of cloud any faster than it was already going to happen. But it certainly could benefit SAP and IBM as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great points, some great articles this week, but I'm excited to get into this interview today.
Yeah. With all the complexities we talk about in this podcast and in other thought leadership we put out, we thought it might be a good idea to just use this episode to really dive into this simplicity or try to simplify, I should say, digital transformations in a way that your grandmother or any other layperson that doesn't understand technology at all explain it in a way that they can understand. So we're going to try our best to do that, and helping me do that is going to be Bret Robinson from a company called Worx Global. He's going to join me here today in the UK or from the UK, and we're going to talk about how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother. And then later in the show, after the interview and discussion with Bret, we're going to get into our comparison between Workday and SAP S/4HANA, determining which of those two ERP systems is right for you, or whether or not, I guess part of the question is one of these two systems right for you? And if so, which of the two is going to be the best fit? That's what we'll talk about here later today. So if you're going through a software evaluation process and you're considering either SAP and or Workday, you'll definitely want to stick around for that. So be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 205. My name is Eric Kimberling. Here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of the show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformations. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. So thanks for being here today. Excited for our next guest. He's our first time guest on this show, and it's a first time topic. It's the first time we've covered this topic, where we're going to talk about how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother, or if you prefer, how to explain digital transformation to a layperson, someone who doesn't understand anything about ERP or digital transformation, anything like that. How do we explain it to them? And not only so we can explain what we do to other people, but more importantly, how do we explain it to ourselves? How can we simplify digital transformation so it's not so daunting and so complex and so overwhelming? And that's exactly what we want to do today. And joining me here to help unpack this topic and understand this topic in more detail is the CEO of a company called Worx Global. He's actually technically a senior ERP consultant at Worx Global. And he's going to be here to chat with us. His name is Bret Robinson. And with all that being said, Bret, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And first time you and I have had a chance to chat in this sort of format. So thanks for being here. Before we jump in and I start asking you a bunch of questions, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up in this space, as well as Worx Global and what you guys do.
Sure. So, Bret Robinson. I was in the United States Air Force back in the 80s, and I was an aircraft engineer, always testing, always dealing with, all the schematics and things of an aircraft. They started going digital, so they asked me to do a lot of the data aspects of that and the collection, only because I dislocated my knee playing softball and I had nothing else to do and couldn't go on the flight line. So, they ripped my PRP from me and said, "You're office space for 8 weeks." So, and then, just kind of got into testing more and more, and, nothing's complex as an F-15 Strike Eagle, and just started moving into that. And then, just so by chance, I started on an ERP project back in 2003. And of course, the first thing is they said, well, we don't really have any data. Ah, right. Where do I get that from? So just started going out, finding my own data. And then I found that was literally my chalice. Every single contract and job I ever went to was from then on out was data. And it was almost like it was calling me to sort out data. And hence now, people always sort of talk to me. I mean, I have my company Worx Global, and, we go in and we sort out people's data. We make it simple. We make it painless as possible. And, I think we do, pretty good job with that. And, we can migrate from anything to anything. It's all about the data, really. And it's all about the quality of that and how you get to it and get the best data. And that's why we're here today, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And data certainly is a key part of any digital transformation. We'll dive more into that as well. I think you sort of answered this, but I'll ask it again anyway, just to dig in a little bit. But how did you end up? What made you decide, or did you decide to be in the space, or did you sort of stumble into it earlier in your post-military career?
Yeah, I think for me, it was always dealing with third-party SIs. Not all of them are the same. Please don't take me as painting and tarring everyone with the same brush. But most of the SIs I dealt with were just overcomplicating data. That's going to take 6 weeks to get that. I'm just like, look, I'm only wanting suppliers and customers and some products, so I can get started with the SIT testing. I don't need, chapter and verse transactional and all that. I'll make my own, and I think it was then that I just thought, hang on a minute, how long? And then, we need X number of experts. And it was like, this must be costing a fortune. And then before I knew it, I sort of looking and thinking, well, data migration tranche 1, which is 30, maybe 40% if you're very lucky, was, took like 5, 6, 7 months. You're like, that should not take that long. I know this data, use the transaction SC16N and H, and, I know my way around SAP data tables and things. I'm thinking there is no way that should take that long, even the connecting of it, right? So, and that's what kind of, I guess that sort of thought me, hang on a second, there must be an opportunity in this space to help people, genuinely help people sort their data out. So I started, answering questions on LinkedIn, free of charge. Just what do you got? What's your situation? Let's have a quick call and just say, right, point your data migration team at this, and this, and this, or your test team at this, and this, and you can bring that in, blah, blah, blah. Okay, see you later. And I thought, what? I should be charging for this, really. But I'm still let's just call me up. Let's have a chat and see if I can help. But that's kind of where I got to from there.
Right. Just a willingness and want to help make
it
successful.
And not be overcharged.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of simple, it sounds so simple, right? Just do a good job. Don't overcharge. So, and I'm going to ask the audience this question first before I ask you, Bret, because I do want to get your take, but I also want to get sort of a knee-jerk reaction from the audience here. And I'd love to hear from the audience your answer to this question that I'll ask Bret here too. But that is, if you had to explain digital transformation to your grandmother, how would you describe it in the simplest terms? And just to back up for a second, the reason we're not picking on the grandmothers of the world here. If you are a grandparent, I don't mean any offense here. What we're trying to do is say, you know what, if we're going to simplify this for someone who's a layperson, who's not in the technology space, who's not a CIO, who's not a consultant, who doesn't do data stuff like you do, Bret, we're trying to figure out what it is that makes, how you sort of simplify the meaning of digital transformation. So I'd love to hear from the audience. If you don't mind, just drop in the chat real simply, how would you simply define what digital transformation is? And love to hear your perspective on that too, Bret.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the main things is, you got your C-suite people and they say, yeah, I'll sign a budget. And then you got your people who get to the statement of work and look through and say, oh, data is time and materials. Okay, cool. I guess I'm okay with that. And then, they don't really understand what that means. I think for me, the simplest way, you rely on your SMEs to get that information. But it really generally is, it's your core, it's your lifeblood of your company, your data. And with all this AI now, there's tons more of it, right? So if you're encouraging your staff to use AI and things like that, you're generating lots more data. And of course, as well, people are using these automations with like Make and N88, NAN and stuff like that. And they're maybe hitting your website with loads of, you don't know what's in that. It could be absolute rubbish. Maybe they're testing it. So, it's important that you understand your data, at least some people in your company, some data champions. And then it can be really, really easy. It can just be as simple as, I've got customers, I've got suppliers, I sell these products. Cool. That's 3 blocks. We need all that. We need employees, we'll need some of that as well. And it's just breaking it down and literally looking at that, just bit by bit. It's like, explaining to your grandmother, it's like a recipe. It's a cake recipe, Grandma. This is the things I need. Here's the ingredients. This is what I need. I need to make this out of it, which is going from old system to new system. And this is how I do it. So you can literally apply that analogy, in high level, as you said, Eric, not this table connects to this cable by a primary, foreign key and blah, blah, blah. Right. So, but yeah, it's literally just keeping it very, very simple. But, you got to know, your data to a point. You got to be able to answer questions. So if I asked you, out of these employees, which, out of these jobs, different job positions, which ones are you taking over? Oh, we don't use those anymore. Because don't forget as well, no one deletes anything in ERP. So you've got stuff in there when you started. I could tell you where all your data migrations were. I could tell you when you bought a new company and brought new systems in. I could tell you all that by just looking at a couple of tables in your database.
Right.
There you go.
It's interesting that you say recipe because, I love that analogy. I guess I never really thought of this, but, and that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation, which, by the way, I stole this idea from some of your thought leadership. You made a comment in passing about how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother. And that's how this idea to cover this topic. But the beauty, even for you and I, people that do this every day, sometimes I think we complicate things ourselves, because we get caught up in all the details and you start getting into all the technicalities. But if you think of it as a recipe, when we go look at a recipe, usually you're not going to challenge the recipe. You might over time, like learn to tweak it and sort of create your own little spin on the recipe. But generally you're starting with something that you're working from. But we don't do that in digital transformations. We'll do it if we're going to make dinner, at home tonight, but we don't do that when we're spending millions of dollars and years of pain and heartache on an implementation. We don't stop to think, well, what's the right recipe? So I'm curious if we didn't plan on covering this topic, and I'd be curious to hear it from the audience too. But if we're to simplify digital transformation into the people, process, technology components, a lot of people will sort of break it down into 3 things. There's people, there's process, there's technology, and that is digital transformation. What would the percent mix be? What if you were creating your recipe for successful digital transformation? How would you allocate the percentages of the focus on people, process, technology?
Yeah, I think for me, people for like the phase 0 and the scoping element, I would encourage anyone to have your own little company get together where you discuss that. I think the people is the hugest probably amount to start with. You need to understand, you need to all be on board, you need to be all for this to push forward. Anyone that's given any ambiguities or any pushback needs to be answered and brought along, because they will be important at some stage. So people, phase zero, people huge. And I think then it's about, okay, what do we know that's broken? What do we know that's wrong? Is your finance team taking 1 to 3 weeks to sort out the month end for the previous month? If they are, your master data is a little bit in a state. So you need to bring your master data in, because they're going back and correcting the transactional that the master data has supplied, right? And that could be master data, it could be config data as well. So there's little elements of that, right? So you need to, I think people first, and then, your processes, what you want to change, what you want to fix. And then of course the technology, and then these things will morph into, it's more technology. And, once you get the processes developed and less process, and still people will always be at least second, on all that. You need the people, you need to keep it moving forward, right?
Yeah. But yet, I agree with what you said, by the way. Most of the focus should be on people and then process and technology. But I'd say it's probably the inverse of that is the way most companies run the projects. They'll do a majority of the focus on technology, and then whatever time you have left, you might focus on some people and process behind it. So why do you think that is? I mean, you and I agree, and I'm going to come to an audience comment here in a second too that is sort of validating what you and I are saying. But why, if you and I are saying this and others might agree, why do teams have trouble seeing that recipe?
I think because it's because that you don't have the vision of the technology. You can't see it where it is in your situation or in your workplace. You can't envision that. So it's an unknown for you. It's a worrying factor. Oh my God, will it work? Will it fit? Is it going to work? I don't know. Let's go and look at the technology. Go and do, 10 demos of different ERP applications. And by the end of it, you might have a meeting and say, what did you learn from this, this, and this? Oh, really? They just all kind of blended in at once, right? So they all came together, so I can't really distinguish. So I think that's the main thing, is the unknown. I think if you're going to venture out on this, you need to hire someone like myself or Eric, someone more experienced, third stage or something, just to sort of, I know some people at Dragon as well, Paul Byrne and those guys, you just sort of look and say, right, what's best for me? Here's my situation. This is what I do. Even if you got to pay for a consultant for a couple of days just to come in and say, right, I think you should look at these 2 bits of technology. These, I think, is going to suit your needs, right? Just take the whole worry out of it, please. Stop agonizing over this, because it really isn't that difficult. Most of us professionals can look at your business, sit there and think, right, how much data you produce? Right, okay, how much are your sales? Okay, I reckon you're going to need this, and maybe in the cloud, or maybe a hybrid, whichever, depending on what department you're from, whether you're government or you're just a manufacturer, depends, right? But yeah, they could tell you that and say, okay, what's your budget? Okay, right. Yeah, I wouldn't go that. I'd go this. So it's that, really. Get somebody in that really knows the tech, right? Say to yourself, do what you do best. Make stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Sounds so simple. So I want to say hello to a couple of audience comments here, or to a couple of audience members here. Alcinda's joining from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thanks for being here today, Alcinda. We have someone joining from Ethiopia, so thank you for being here. Curious to hear where others are joining from as well. When I asked the definition of what digital transformation is in its simplest terms, Jay Holt on YouTube said, looking holistically at your IT department, defining a roadmap for today, tomorrow, and your future. So that's a good way to look at it, sort of focusing on that future state and figuring out how technology is gonna help you get there. And then this is from Alcinda again on LinkedIn. Alcinda says 50% focus on people, 20% on process, 30% on technology. And that's similar to what you were saying, although the process and technology part, you could argue maybe that should be flipped. But I think they're directionally, without getting too caught up in slicing hairs. That sounds pretty similar to what you're saying, Bret.
Yeah, it depends on the stage, and I agree with that. That would flip once you got past the the requirements and you're pretty solid on what you're going. And your IT department says, right, no more changes, sort of thing. So yeah, and that would flip definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as well you need to include the business, because what we always do in this is it's IT led, right? You need to bring the business along. You need to help them understand the places where it might be a bit too IT. So again, that's why you need some couple of professional people who has that view and can talk to the business and explain to them and bring that business unit along with you, right? Because you need that. Don't lose them.
Right. Yeah, I want to say hello to James in UK, Julio in Atlanta, Georgia. Here's a follow-up question to what you were just talking about, Bret. This is a really interesting question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, how do you strike the right balance between following the recipe and making customizations or alterations to fit your organization's needs? So how do you, what's the right balance between following a recipe versus sort of tweaking it to fit who you are as an organization or who you're trying to become?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, back in the early ECC days in the 80s, everybody thought, right, we've got an ABAP. We need 5 ABAP developers. We need to customize everything. But now with the technology and like with HANA, S4 HANA and some of the Oracle Fusion stuff and all that, it's come along so far. A lot of things now that we were tweaking with ABAP or we were creating some custom code for is now more or less just an option in the config, right? Because I think these companies who've created these, they also go out to the business and find out what's everybody doing in the manufacturing space, what's everybody doing in the aerospace industry, where I came from, so, and they kind of get the best of breed to make their product more fit those scenarios. And I think, you need to, try and keep down the limitation, but moving from the old school to the new one, there are applications that you can actually get that will go and review all of your objects, which is your code, your customizations, and it will tell you, all the changes that you need to make. And then you can sort of have a specialist look at that and say, yeah, that's all config, yep. And, okay, we need to tweak these couple of things here, right? Because we used to hard code, go to C:\/ to this server name, and here's the files over here, or this is the AL11 directory or whatever, it's all hard coded. We got to try and come away from that, because then it makes us more fluid. So we'll move into the cloud at the moment. If things change in 10 years time, we got to move on premise. Okay, it's a lot easier transition, right? So nowadays, but that's a good question. Good thing to say about that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, the topic here at hand, just for those that are just joining, this is explaining digital transformation to your grandmother. And we're trying to simplify digital transformation and talk about digital transformation in its simplest terms. We're trying to boil it down here. And so another question I have for you Bret, is what are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about digital transformations?
I think they're thinking that it's just going to be drains up. There's going to be so much upheaval. Everyone's going to be seconded to the project. How I think a common one is my SMEs have got to do a J job. Should I replace them on the project, or should I replace them in the workplace? How should I do that? I think with any firm on that particular instance, you need to probably look at getting some other people in the department to help out with their daily duties while they help out with the business. Because the one thing you always got to focus on is your SME is probably one of the most key people in the whole transformation process. They are the kingpin. And the reason is they know the business, they know the data, they know the requirements, they know what they need. They can then help with the config, and they can help with these customizations. And, why do you use that? Yeah, we use that because we do this and this and this, and then we need to change that. Okay. So those SME people are going to be like pulled from pillar to post. And I think you need to protect them to the point that you need to try and maybe backfill them in the workplace rather than backfill them in the project, because we need those people to understand all those things I mentioned. And that's quite key, for you to have that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, what are some of the? I know we talked about the recipe here. The people
Right, yeah.
process technology, but what are some of the other key ingredients you need to make a transformation successful? If we're sort of building out that recipe that we were talking about a little while ago.
Yeah, I think obviously, the requirements, and there's requirements, and then there's non-functional, there's functional and non-functional requirements as well. Will I need to do performance testing and load testing and all these other different things, the types of testing. And I think as well is your business analysts. So you'll maybe have business analysts within your company. They're going to show those requirements to the SI when they show up, system integration partner. When they show up, they'll say, yeah, here's our requirements. We got those. And they're going to probably add tons more to it. Hopefully not too much, but yeah, they'll add more to it that kind of fit more in with the solution, because yours is taken more from the business. I think the requirements, the testing types. I think as well, my area is the data. What data do you use? What don't you use if you do know? Where is your data coming from? Do you get things from like FIFO, Trustpilot? Are you a drug company? Do you get outside doctors or an outside service that gives you data on new drugs and things like that? So all these different things, you need to be able to know where your data is and how that works. Because again, in that recipe under data, we might have to slot in a few different elements that we're going to need to bring to that recipe, that it doesn't fit. It's not a one size fits all. You can't take that recipe up in manufacturing and move it over to defense and say, no, it's not the same. So you're going to have to adjust it according to your business model. But again, it all gets back to that senior consultant who can look at your business and think, yeah, don't forget, these senior people, they've done, I've done over 50 programs in this nature in one way or another, right? So, and Eric's probably done quite a few as well. And some of the people I mentioned earlier at Dragon and stuff probably done loads as well, right? So you need to get that professional in to give you that view and help you set up for success. As Kyler, I think, said before to me, the setup for success.
Right. Yeah. Those are really important ones. And, it's a good reminder that there's a lot of different things that go into making these projects successful. But at the same time, when you look at what it is that's required to be successful, it doesn't require, an extraordinary amount of intelligence or extraordinary amount of time or money that you don't have necessarily. It's just finding that right mix. I think that's really what we're saying here, is that if you do things smarter and if you follow the right recipe, sort of like when you're cooking. I mean, going back to that metaphor, I mean, if you're cooking and you're not following a recipe, it's probably going to take you a lot longer, and you're probably going to make a mess in the kitchen trying to just figure it out as you go. And that's unfortunately what a lot of organizations do, when they could just be following a recipe that's proven to work for organizations.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I want to. We've actually taken a pass at creating a sort of a recipe for how to make these projects successful, and I want to just share with you a QR code for the audience here. If you want to download it, we have a book out that we put out that is Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations, and we take 20 things. We have a recipe of about 20 things that organizations need to do to be successful in their projects. So I encourage you to download this ebook. You can get it for free on our website. It's called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. A lot of what we're talking about here today is outlined in the book, and there's stuff in the book that we may not get to here today as well. But just want to encourage you, as a supplementary point of view here, you can download that here, and I'll leave that up for a second. I'll take it away and I'll put it back later too. But while people are scanning that QR code, which you can scan in front of you, and I'll include a link in the description below for those that aren't watching this on video, could you maybe share an example of a company that you've worked with that got digital transformation, maybe and I hate to say in a simple way, because these are never simple, but could you maybe simplify or summarize for us why that company was successful, and tell us what they did different than companies that often fail?
Yeah, sure. So so had a client, is a university that I worked with a few years ago, and I think they had IBM or someone in there, And, I just said to them, I said, look, let's look at your data. They had 300 and some odd spreadsheets that was maintaining the student records and courses and everything else. Why it was 300? I always remember that number, 348 spreadsheets. And you're like, that is mental. And they had SAP as well, which is really scary. But so it didn't do this job very well. And it was literally, give us all this data and let's try and find out all of our columns that we're using and why they're important, and go through with each person, say, highlight in red what's your most important columns that you can't live without. And then, and come to find out that almost all of them were the same. And because they talked to each other, but they never really shared spreadsheets and stuff. So it was kind of funny to see that and say, well, you guys are pretty much following the same thing almost, some slight different names and stuff. But to bring them all together was very quick and easy. Brought them into SQL Server and then just started doing some scripts on that and comparing it. And it was much, much simpler because they were just running around like chickens, with the head cut off. And they were like, we don't know how to do this. We don't know what's the best place to start. Where do I start? And, and that's what can be overwhelming about data when you first see it, because don't forget as well, you see it on a screen. We see it in linear sort of flat files, right? That we know connect through what's called primary keys and foreign keys, right? So we know that a customer number is a primary key, links to the orders table, primary key, customer number. So it's our foreign key, customer number, and then primary key is the order number, right? So we know that, and we know how to get to that picture very, very quickly to then be able to say, this data is in that shape or this shape or whatever. But and they found that, it much, much quicker because no one from the SI really sat them down and explained to them, this is the way you should approach it. But again, see, getting someone in, a consultant, even if it's for a few days, can open up a whole world of, just make things so much clearer for you, right? Give you a new pair of glasses or give you a new recipe sheet because that one's got spillage all over it and you can't read it now. So,
right.
Yeah.
No, I love it. The more we talk about the cooking / even though I'm a terrible cook, by the way, I'm the worst cook in the world. I can almost guarantee that of everyone listening, including yourself, Bret, I'm probably the worst cook. But so I shouldn't be. Maybe that's why I like the metaphor so much, because I don't know what I'm doing in the kitchen. So if I have a recipe, it makes it that much better. But I think it's true. I mean, you think about too, the time it takes to prepare, when you've got the recipe, what you need to go to the store and buy, what equipment you need in the kitchen, that sort of thing. And what I think a lot of organizations do though, is they, continuing with this metaphor, that they bring in the cooks or the chefs before they even have considered what the recipe is or what it is they're going to make or what ingredients they need. And then the cooks and chefs are billing by the hour. In this case, the software vendors are billing by the hour while you're trying to figure out, what raw materials do I need? What do I need? Where's the equipment? How do I bring everything I need into the kitchen? Where I think a lot of organizations fall flat. We're here discussing how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother. I'm here with Bret Robinson from Worx Global. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, ton of ebooks that are free,
You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 205. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformations. I'm here with Bret Robinson from Worx Global. We're talking about how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother. But you also talked about collaboration here. In Afra from LinkedIn has a good comment that the partnership with the business is so important. So, this can't just be an IT driven project. I mean, you've got to have business involvement. Would you agree with that, Bret?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need them. Like I said, the SME is probably the most important person in your project next to the budget holder, right? So they're quite important to have them along for the ride, because nothing's going to get, at the end of the day, I've been here many times where you get to the end, signatures, please. Right, are you happy with all the testing and everything that's gone forward? No, I'm not. Why not? Well, because no one explained this and this to me. That's new. It's what? Yeah, that's, oh, you mean that? Oh, okay, well, I didn't have it explained to me like that. So you need them every step of the way, because if you lose them at any point, get to that signature and they won't sign it, because they're like, well, no, you haven't proven that to me. Sorry. So you need them every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's either Matt or MAAT, I'm not sure which, on YouTube says this is new digital fascism. That's the best explanation for your granny. And I actually love this. I actually made a note here when I saw this come in. I'm actually going to steal this idea, Matt, if you don't mind, or MAAT. This is a great idea for a YouTube video. Digital fascism. It's going to be the.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there we go. See what ChatGPT comes up with that. Give me 10 ideas around this concept.
Yeah, digital fascism. Yeah. I never heard that term, but I love it.
That's great.
It's funny, though. But that is something that many grandmothers could probably relate to.
Yeah.
So when we look at failure, then, why digital transformations fail, why organizations fail when they're implementing technology. Again, this is your grandmother asking the question. Why is that? Why is it so hard for organizations to adapt new technology?
I think the main thing is, excuse me, because, three things really. They didn't understand the technology, or they didn't understand their full business from a group perspective. And as always, it's all about the data. They didn't understand their data and how that's actually going to work for them. And, you can get every SI under the planet who's done thousands of these transformations, and because you're different, and because they rely, well, not different from what they've done, but because they rely on your signature, you're paying the bill, you got to sign off the milestones, they're going to look to you for a lot. And having your own team that you select of professional, whether that be contractors or business people, will really stand you in good stead, because then at least you can face off against that and say, well, okay, let my expert answer that. Oh, no, it's this and this and this. I've done that many times. A lot of SIs probably won't hire me because I'm always for the customer. And I'm always saying, right, you got to do that because it says so in the statement of work. It's like, where did you get that from? So, and it's very, that's very key.
Yeah, exactly. What about, here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. What advice would you give to managers about balancing day-to-day operations with the demands of a digital transformation project? Because just to back up for a second to set the context. I mean, in fact, I was just meeting before we came live here on this interview. I was meeting with a potential client where I'm traveling here this week, and that was one of the concerns they had. Is like we have a business to run, we've got our day-to-day operations, and at the same time now we're just adding this big project to the workload of our team. How do you advise in a simple way how to best balance that? And why is it so important to have that right mix of internal resources?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, if you got like a 2 month or a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month window, try and get some ideas down on not only just the requirements that you're going to want to put in, but also as well as where the finance team or the business team have issues with data, where that's, meet with your security team and say, how many composite roles and things do you think we should have? And can you get me a matrix for that? Try and do enough to where they can just work on it a little bit. So maybe have a weekly catch up, just to say, where are you getting on with your tasks that you have to do for the security model, for instance, which is your roles and your access levels and things like that. And, just kind of pull that together, and data as well is list out the elements. I think the more you preempt, and if you get some juniors in, or you get some people in the team that you can divvy up those key people's responsibilities, that will stand you in good stead. Because like I said to you, the SMEs will be pulled from pillar to post, and you really need that. And again, bring in a core consultant team, like maybe, 3 or 4 people, one as the program manager, and then get somebody on testing, someone on data, and someone on requirements. So it can help the business understand, and also as well as help backfill to help them out, because like I said, they would have done this many times before. And once they know your direction and where you're going and what you've got already, if you have any older requirements or things like that, or you've got a wish list, they can help bring that to life. So that's quite key. Like I said, it's a little bit of money spent up front, but you know what? It will pay loads of dividends in the end, and you will get less change requests, less problems with data migration, less problems with testing and all those things. If you just get those key people, and testing has to be at the beginning as well, because that's so ideal and so important to bring that in. So they just got an idea, the whole scope, and they can start working out scenarios, and maybe even start working on some automation, start getting that ready, right? So they can front load customers, orders, all those sorts of things. So there's a bit clearer way of thinking. I think those sort of things will help out with immensely.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And what about, sorry, I just lost my question that I had ready to ask you. Speaking of, you were talking about that time to, investing in time that's going to save you time and money later. What about when we talk about the planning process, the upfront planning for a project? Why is that so important, and how does that impact a digital transformation, the upfront planning piece?
Yeah, the upfront planning, you have to know that, okay, so in the 3 months, we're going to do all these things, and here's a list of the things that we need to do and the tasks and things. Day one, when the troops rock up, what do they need? They're going to need some data, because your developers are going to start, configuring, they're going to start putting things together. So they need to know what that data is, because if they don't, and they run against the question, that SME, hey, what do you want for this? What do you want for that? And then somebody else is going to say, hey, we connect with HR. We need you over here to tell us about these things, so you need to sort of get that professional to help you. Okay, this is what's going to happen on day one. Month one's going to be roughly like this. Month two, like this. I mean, I try and get, if we can get, like DataWorks Global, if we come in and we did a pre-clean on your data, sort of thing, I like to try and run the first data migration workbench on like SAP, for instance, S4HANA, within the first couple of weeks. Just say, right, okay, press a button, let's see what falls out, right? What do you got to lose? And just keep testing that. But just kind of get a schedule where it's kind of a little bit loose, but, someone that knows what they're doing, like Eric and myself, we can sort of map out roughly how things are going to pan out and fall roughly within a couple of weeks of where you're going to need things and how you should shape it. So, and that's key to get that plan in a skeleton sort of format, because your SI is going to try and rock it, maybe push back. If you can apply the statement of work to that plan, that helps. So then you can kind of sort of gauge for your PID, project initiation document, or just how are you going to approach this, Mr. Businessman? If I choose this SI, what's your approach and how do you work? And they might be able to give you some stuff that would help fit over top of that plan.
Right. Now, what about when we look at not just our own grandmothers, but let's go look to the workplace and look at our coworkers, our colleagues, our superiors, our peers, our subordinates. All these different people throughout the organization are probably less tech savvy than you or I might be, or a lot of the more technical people on the call might be. So what are some of the best ways to simplify the benefits of digital transformation to an employee who's not tech savvy?
I always use the analogy. Okay, so like I did at the beginning, when your finance team takes 2-3 weeks to sort out month end, very painful, very time consuming, and then week 4 they're back on the finance stuff, right? So you can't ever get their time. It's really, really difficult. And and I always say that find the pain points. Where are you experiencing these type of pains, and you kind of give them to them, because you can almost guess, right? Well, it comes from experience. It's not really guessing, but you can kind of bring to them to the fore. You're probably experiencing this, yep, doing that. And what about this? Yep, always doing that. And what about your security model? Oh God, it's so hard to get the right mix of credentials and access set up, and and what about it? Oh yeah, they always run the wrong report. That's what's always getting us. They always run the wrong one. Well, take it out, right? So don't let them run that anymore. Oh yeah, but if we do that, then so and so who still uses it, but they only get this bit of information from it, still will probably use it, right? So it's the old adage that I always experience, like, well, just switch it off and see who screams. So it's like you switch it off, it's like, oh, so-and-so halfway across the world still uses that report, right? So you get a lot of that, but
yeah, that's a great point. Now, what about the benefits of digital transformation then? So if we're focusing on what it can do, for people that are resisting change. Let's just say we're dealing with employees in our organization. They're not on board with the change. They don't want to change. As imperfect as the old legacy systems and processes might be, people are comfortable with that, for better or for worse, and it sometimes is hard for them to change. So how do you simplify the why? Why should we go through a digital transformation, or why should I support the digital transformation?
Yeah, do you know what I get a lot, Eric? I get a lot of people saying, I think this is going to replace my job. So why should I participate in this? I say, hey, no, that's no problem. Look, I can help you find the area where you might be able to get another job in the same company, but we'll just sidestep you, So, and that's the hard one, is trying to replace someone, right? They think the software is going to replace them. It's like again, back to the finance. You're taking 2 to 3 weeks to do the previous month end. You've probably got an extra 3-4 bods in your team. Of course, if you're no longer having to do that, if we take that away from you, what's these 3 or 4 people going to? Well, we'll probably make them redundant. Okay, well, and then you got to try and reuse them, somewhere else in the business. But I think it's taking away the pain. Look, this will answer that. This will take this away. And I think that's what a lot of SIs do, is they get into the sales room because they're dealing with the salesy people, in the sense that we have to sell to this person. So they're showing you all the whizzy reports. They're showing you all the great things about it, how you can access it via your mobile and, halfway across the world. And you don't need to do this anymore, because that will run it for you into BI or Snowflake or whatever application you're using, right? So it's kind of like that. But I think for the intermediate managers, how am I going to cope with this? What do I need to know? What do I need to do? And I think if you're training the people you bring on for the training, if they're worth anything, and I always encourage people when I show up on site, say, have you checked out the SAP, help.sap.com? Have you checked that out? There's tons of information on there. Have you checked out SAP, where they've got tons of videos and courses for free, and all this different information that, might at least give you some insights, right? So I don't try and reinvent the wheel. I try and use what's already there. And, I've got a lot of resources in that as well that I always call on. There's loads of people on LinkedIn saying, oh, here's how you run the SD process, or this is how the sales process, or this is how you run the Dunning run in finance, and they've done a guide, right? And you can take that into chat to like Notebook ALM and say, make me a step guide for this on 1-page A4 so I can give to my team, and boom, there it is. So you're using AI and bringing all that into it and helping do the same thing, helping your colleagues out as well. So yeah, I think that's the main secret, Eric, is when someone's got passion for what they're doing, like you, me, and others as well, we've got the passion, it kind of infuses people like, yeah, I'm on board with these people. They know what they're talking about. Okay, cool. It's not so scary. Right, cool. And some will sit back and say, okay, I'm going to watch you guys. Yeah, you're very, you pull people in, you're leading us away, and, okay, but I'm just going to watch the back door and just make sure no one's trying to sneak anything in on us, So, and you'll get those people. You can't please everyone, right? So you just have to, keep positive, keep speaking to them positively, draw them in, bring them in as much as you can. And once they start putting their hand up and being part of it, hey, problem solved, right?
Yeah. Now, what about culture? Every organization has a unique culture, a different culture, and it may sound like it has nothing to do with digital transformation, but it does. How would you describe or simplify how a company's culture is influenced by or influences digital transformation?
Yeah, I think as well, it's how you do, because I notice things about universities are really laid back and yeah, man, whatever, and yeah, it happens over here. You go see that person and I'll get to it. And I find as well, they're the most strictest of jobs. Look, don't talk to me unless you've gone through that person first. And, you gotta just, again, it helps having a really good team who's got very positive attitude and, and you can read the room and say, right, okay, this is not going to work. I can't be too heavy with these people, but these people over here, I can just, look, we need this, you just got to be able to fit around everyone, right? You're not going to please everyone, so don't freak out, but, you are going to have to try and bring them online. And I find one-on-ones, what do you find about this that's upsetting you? What do you find? Sometimes you're a bit of not just a consultant on ERP, you're also a consultant with, personal feelings, like you mentioned, Eric, with the previous question. You got to try and bring those people along. So you just got to find out look, that just doesn't set well with me. Okay, cool, fine. How do we approach it? Keep it open door, keep the comm lines open, and just keep, pushing it forward, but where to push hard and where to push softly, and how to appease everyone. And unfortunately, that's where, or fortunately, that's where you get people like like professional consultants that can come in and help you. Don't necessarily have to be a SAP or Oracle. Those can be quite expensive, but someone who's done plenty of them and who's got the right people skills can help bring the team together and can fit various different cultures, like offshore models, onshore, disparate teams, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Makes sense. Now, what about, this is another question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, how do you gather and prioritize feedback about employee pain points to guide your digital transformation efforts?
Yeah, I think a forum, start out. I've seen people sometimes do one online saying, hey, we got an intranet page set up. We're doing a digital transformation, as you guys know about, talked about it for weeks. We'd really like to get your feedback. And again, a consultant, or you can go out and, find various different things online that say, what are some really good questions to ask. I've just done, in the middle of finishing one where someone's asked for like a chatbot, and we programmed the chatbot to ask various questions. That's what we're doing now, and saying, hey, okay, so what part of the business you work in? Finance. Okay, cool. Here's some topics. What do you want to discuss mostly? I want to discuss, time, or I want to discuss, manual extra work we have to do, or, whatever, right? And you get them to start communicating through that AI assistant, who can then start feeding in all these different elements, so you can say, oh yeah, okay, cool. So at least then you kind of know, and you're asking them in the comfort of their own sort of office space, rather than, getting them to put their hand up in a meeting room with 30, 40 people, which a lot of people won't necessarily speak out. But if you give them something like a AI assistant or chatbot or whatever you want to call it nowadays, use that. I'm trying to get more into that and creating those for projects, because I think that's just going to save so much time and effort, and you can implement that at any time, even if you're going to be doing this in a year's time, right? Going through the transformation, at least you've got some knowledge and you've got some experience and you've got some feedback that will really help champion your project, and just ask questions in their terms, right? Their lingo.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm going to pull up one more time here. I'm going to pull up the QR code to download our book called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. It's a pretty quick read. It's meant to be simple. It gives you 20 different things that successful digital transformations and ERP projects do differently than the ones that fail. So I'll leave that up for a second. Scan the QR code. I'll include a link below. But I'm going to ask the audience, and then I'm going to ask you the same sort of capstone closing question here, Bret. And that is, if you were to actually, I'm going to ask you a two-part question. I'll ask the audience too. If you were to pick 3 simple steps that any organization can take to start their digital transformation journey, what would it be? And I'm curious to hear from the audience too. You don't have to give me 3, but just give me 1 or 2. But for you, Bret, I'll ask you for 3. The audience too. But what are the 3 things that a company could do to simplistically get started in a way that makes sense?
I think the main thing is get on top of your data. Know what your data is doing, because your data is going to feed everything. Okay, your data is going to feed your requirements. It's going to feed your config. It's going to feed, your business processes. So why does that data get like that? Oh, that's because the process is messed up. Can we make that a required field? Okay, it's a process, but now you wanted a required field. Excuse me. So that's a config. So it's that. So if you can get on top of your data, that's going to answer a huge amount of questions, and it's going to feed your requirements, it's going to feed your business processes, right? And that's key, because you need that. And I think that's probably the main one. And again, your business processes, your requirements, because what happens in the program 3 months in, 3-4 months in, all of a sudden, hang on a minute, this is not working. This data is not working. Okay, we need to simplify that. Oh, well, okay, that's a change request maybe, potentially, or we need a new field. Right. What's that going to do to this? So then you need everybody feeding in to say, what's the impact of that? Do you have any impact to that CR? We're going to raise that CR. See what I mean? So all of a sudden, then you start getting all these CRs in because you didn't look at your data before you started, because then it just kind of makes more sense to you. And that's kind of the key. Data, your processes, and of course, your culture has to come into it, your people, and knowing that as well, I think.
Data, processes, people. Those are the kind of the 3 that you'd summarize as far as the keys to success. Fercho on YouTube agrees, at least on the process definition piece. So Fercho says process definition is the most important. So thanks for that comment there, Fercho. And I agree with you, by the way. I think data, process, people, I think those are 3 really good ones. Now, here's my real capstone closing question for you, Bret. And this is, if you had to sum up digital transformation success in 1 sentence, what would it be? You talked about the 3 things, but if you had to sort of summarize now, you talk about the 3 steps that an organization can do to get started, but how would you sum up digital transformation in 1 sentence?
Digital transformation, I think in 1 sentence is, for me, is getting the right people on board, whether that be internally or externally, is going to pay huge dividends. And those right people externally are going to know about data. They're going to know about the processes and about what's already been configured and your objects and all that. And your business, where do you want to now go? If we could alleviate any pain points, what would they be for your department, right? So that's to me is probably the key one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's my definition, if I were to put it the same kind of concept into my own words, I'd say, it's the use of process technologies and people to improve your business. So it's part technology. I think the word digital in digital transformation is misleading because it makes it, it's technology, right? It's like, well, sort of it is, but it's really not. I mean, more of the effort should be going into the other stuff, but I think that's the trouble we all have with digital transformation is we think digital in our heads, but really it's people, process, strategy, culture, data. It's all this other stuff that doesn't really have a lot to do with the software or the technology itself. Good stuff. So how can people learn more about you, connect with you, learn more about DataWorks? What's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, Bret Robbie, or go to dataworksglobal.com and book a chat. We can book a call and have a chat about your potential situation. I think as well, even if you started down the transformation road, how do you pull it back in? Because what I've experienced on many transformations is the data is taking ages and it's holding everybody up. How can we accelerate that? What can we do? What tools can we use? Try and steer clear. I've just had some nightmares recently with SDS, SAP Data Services. Oh my goodness. So there's definitely some steep learning curves on some of these tools and some of these things that people just fly off the cuff with. So just really kind of do some homework, but reach out to me and ask me, say, oh, this company's telling me this and this and this. What do I need to go back with? Or what should I answer back? Just hit me up on LinkedIn, connect with me, and I'll be happy to, or Bret at dataworksglobal.com. That's Worx, WORX, global.com. Just give me an email and I'll be happy to, help you out. Whatever you need. As long as it doesn't take me a week or something to do.
Because you two have a real job.
Oh, yeah.
As well. But
yeah, exactly. Right.
But good. And right before I let you go and thank the audience here, I want to get to one last audience point because I think this is really a good closing statement here. This is from Fercho again. Fercho's on a roll on YouTube.
It is.
Comments in a row here. But Fercho says the definition of digital transformation that this person chooses to use is reshaping the business model to solve a problem with the use of technology, which I kind of like that because it's a business. You're focused on the business model. You're focused on technology as an enabler. And within the business model, obviously that includes your operations, your processes, your data, your people, a lot of other pieces. But I think it's a good, interesting summary. So thanks for that comment, Fercho. All right. Thanks, Bret. That was a great conversation. And I think we've done our best here to try and simplify digital transformation, although I'll admit I do have trouble sometimes not getting hung up in the weeds in the details of some of this stuff. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to debrief some of the conversation here and cover a couple of follow-up items. And then later, after that discussion, we're going to dive into the comparison between SAP and Workday. So be sure to stick around for that. First, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to announce release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 205. This is Eric Kimberling. I'm here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. So thanks for being here today. So, Darian, we just had Bret on the show to talk about how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways? Do you think your grandmother would understand digital transformation now after hearing that conversation, or is she still going to have open questions here?
You know, I mean, my grandma is 90, so I don't know if she she may be able to understand it, but she might have some follow-up questions, as I do too. So, I mean, maybe we're in the same boat.
Yeah, let's get to those questions so we can get to the point where your grandmother understands.
Yes, exactly. But no, I mean, it was a really interesting conversation. I mean, one thing I found interesting was, how you guys were talking about how SMEs are constantly highlighted as key players in a transformation. And it's interesting to consider how protecting their time and leveraging their expertise strategically is vital to, project success. But for you, have you found any strategies effective for balancing SME workloads during a transformation?
Yes. Well, a couple things. First of all, is you have to be realistic about what you can or can't do. I mean, we have too many clients or too many organizations we work with where I think they say, well, sure, we can get, let's just say 7 full-time people to be on the core project team. And then it turns into, well, they can't be 100%, but they could be 70%. And then it turns into, well, a couple of them could be 70%, but the rest of them are going to be 30%. And then, you sort of negotiate your way down to where suddenly the internal resources aren't involved and you're outsourcing too much of the project to the SIs and the software vendors and all that stuff. So you've got to be realistic about what you really can and can't do. And it's okay if you can't commit the resource allocation you need. But what you need to do then is revisit your approach and plan, because oftentimes what happens is software vendor comes and says, okay, we can implement this technology in X number of months or X number of years. But the assumption is that you're going to provide X number of full-time resources or whatever it is. And if you can't do that, then you need to be clear about that up front, so that instead of it taking, let's just say 18 months, and assuming that you have full-time resources, it may be that if you don't have full-time resources, it doesn't take 18 months, it takes 24 months or whatever it is. And you want to recast the plan that way. And that's really, really important, because the software vendor and the system integrator is probably going to be able to keep up and staff it as heavy as you want, because they make more money if they staff it as heavy as you want. So, but that's not necessarily the right answer or the best answer for your organization. So you want to make sure you get aligned and on the same page with saying, hey, we can't have full-time resources. So that means we need to stretch out the plan. And that means we need to lower our run rate and our spend rate on the project throughout. So starting with realistic expectations, I think, is the big thing. But I think the other thing is management needs to support and plan for this activity to where you have backfill and you have support to help people do their day jobs when they're focused on the project. So in other words, if I'm going to give you, I expect you to do this podcast every week, but now I'm going to ask you to do a big ERP project, something's probably going to have to give. You might have to bring in help to take on this, the podcast or other marketing stuff that you do, so that you can focus on the ERP project. And so we need to find ways to backfill you by bringing in resources to help. So you just have to have a deliberate plan and strategy to do that. So I think that's the other part of it, is making sure you have the support and the commitment from management to provide the resources to support the overall project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back here to, the simplifying or simplicity of what you guys were talking about for digital transformations. And I think this would be something that, as somebody who is in marketing and not necessarily in digital transformations, right? Like I'm not in those conversations that are super technical going through projects. So with this, one thing you guys were talking about is explaining transformation through relatable points. I know you guys use recipes and other things like that, which makes it more tangible and understandable for all employees. So, what are the most effective ways that you have found to communicate benefits of digital transformation to the non-technical team members?
I think the big part of it is not focusing on the technology, but focusing on the team member and focusing on the hot buttons or the pain points or the struggles that a team member has. So if there's, frustration on the employee's part that they have to spend too much time fixing other people's mistakes or searching for data that's hard to find or, dealing with multiple systems, multiple screens, multiple data entry points, you want to focus on those advantages and sort of get to the heart of what's in it for me. When I say what's in it for me, I don't mean me. I mean the employee. What's in it for me, the employee, and speak their language. And most of the employees, by the way, are not speaking the language of technology or technology vendors or software systems. They're speaking the language of order processing or customer service or sales or whatever it is they do day to day. And that's the language you have to speak when you're trying to sell them on the idea of the benefit of digital transformation. So that's one layer, is what's in it for me. But then there's also what's in it for us. What's in it for us as a team, as an overall organization, as a department, as a location, if it's a multi-location company, whatever it is. So you want to speak both layers of the language. What's in it for me? What's in it for us as an overall team?
Yeah, I like that. And I know another thing that you guys suggested was, using forms or surveys to collect feedback from these employees on what are those pain points that they are having in this transformation or that they currently have. But how do you prioritize and act on the feedback that you may gather from, let's say, the survey or the form that you're giving them, especially when suggestions are diverse or contradictory?
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, they are going to be diverse and contradictory. The key is to, first of all, recognize that. I mean, the good thing with surveys is you start to see how well aligned or not a team is. And again, I think a lot of times we want to jump to a conclusion that that's bad. If you're not aligned, that's bad. That's just normal. I don't think it's good or bad. It's just normal for an organization not to be 100% aligned. So the key isn't getting hung up on whether or not we're aligned. It's more, how do we get aligned? So if you have diverse opinions and you're getting conflicting opinions, it really comes back to, oftentimes management leadership has to make decisions around what the right path is or what the chosen path is going to be, because it can't be unanimous vote, because we're never going to get to a consensus unanimously. It may not even be a majority vote. It may be that the executives want to take the company or need to take the company a different direction than what the employees think. And not that you don't want to ask the employees, but you might, you might take from employees more of a focus on the things that support the direction of the company. And then the focus can then become, well, how do we get other people on board, knowing that wasn't their first instinct or that wasn't their choice? How do we get the other people on board who maybe didn't share that same opinion or sentiment or whatever? So that's just part of the change management process, and that's the stuff that will slow down or derail a project if you don't focus on it. If you ignore it and say we're just going to power through, use the weight of our leadership to push this initiative forward, and we're going to drag the employees along, you could do that. That's just going to slow things way down. You're going to get a lot of resistance. It's going to cost you a ton of time and money. You'd be a lot better off and better served by investing in, getting that alignment and getting people more engaged and more involved and more in sync with what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a great conversation today. I feel like it was really valuable and really simple for hopefully a lot of our audience to understand.
Yeah. Hopefully it was, and I'd love to hear from the audience. What would you add to the conversation? How would you simplify the term digital transformation, whether it's what it means or what it takes to be successful or what you shouldn't do? I'd love to hear just your real simple layperson comments in the chat here, wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. Love to hear your feedback there. And maybe we can use that as content for future episodes to talk through some of those comments and questions. And we've got one last segment we want to get to here today. We're going to compare SAP to Workday, and this is actually a clip we're going to play you from my YouTube channel, where I put out a brief video that talks about sort of an independent comparison of the pros and cons of the two systems. These are two systems that are oftentimes considered by some of our larger client base, SAP S/4HANA and Workday. Two very different systems, though, different strengths and weaknesses. And so what we want to do is provide you sort of an independent view of that. So with that being said, let's roll the clip here of our comparison of SAP versus Workday.
One of the biggest service offerings we provide to our clients is independent software evaluation and selection. We're not affiliated with SAP or Workday or any other software vendor for that matter. And oftentimes we're asked to evaluate and compare SAP S/4HANA and Workday for our clients. Now, SAP has been around for a long time. It's been sort of the behemoth in the enterprise tech space now for a couple decades. They've been somewhat of a gold standard for larger multinational organizations, especially in manufacturing, supply chain management, and other industries. And Workday, on the other hand, is a newer system, not new, but newer. It's a SaaS-based system that has grown into prominence here just in the last decade or so. And two very different systems, two very strong systems, but they couldn't be much more different in a lot of ways. So what I wanted to do today is share with you some of the differences and the similarities between these two systems to ultimately give you a balanced view and a balanced understanding of the pros and cons of each of these systems so that you can make a more informed decision for your organization. Now, if you'd like to learn more about different enterprise technologies in the space, including SAP and Workday and other systems, I encourage you to download our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's a report we publish each year, and it features a number of independent reviews and rankings of different systems in the marketplace, as well as other best practices to ensure that your ERP implementation is successful. You can download the report for free by scanning the QR code right here. Let's start with a functional comparison of SAP S/4HANA versus Workday. Starting with S/4HANA. S/4HANA is an end-to-end ERP system that provides a number of different modules that really provide a complete ERP solution for organizations throughout the world. It includes things like financials, inventory management, warehouse management, manufacturing, supply chain management, procurement, all sorts of different functions. And SAP's goal over the years has been to provide a single solution that can provide a lot of different capabilities, a lot of breadth to large, complex organizations. Workday, on the other hand, started off as a human capital management system. So they really focused in this little niche, which isn't so little, by the way, in HR technology. So they focused on HR, things like performance management, talent management, recruiting, other things related to HR. And over the years, they've expanded and evolved into other areas. They now provide a complete financial solution, and they're starting to even expand beyond that. So Workday is a little bit more focused. They've got less breadth than SAP, but they tend to fit really well within certain industries. Industries like professional services, financial services, education, for example. Those are just a few examples of some of the industries that gravitate toward Workday. S/4HANA, on the other hand, tends to appeal to other types of industries, particularly manufacturing, distribution, retail, and other supply chain intensive organizations. The primary reason being that they have pretty strong manufacturing and supply chain capabilities, whereas Workday typically does not. So depending on which industry you're in, that's probably going to drive what system you're going to gravitate towards. And depending on the scope of what it is you want from a system is going to lead you to the right solution in many cases. Some manufacturers might find that Workday is a great fit because all they really want is a financial and HR system. Some financial services might find that SAP is a great fit because it's got great reporting and analytics capabilities, even though they don't need all the other stuff that SAP can provide. So it really depends on what you're looking for and what the scope is of your overall implementation. But in general, they're very different in terms of functionality. And in general, they're going to provide different strengths and weaknesses for your organization. Another dimension worth exploring when we compare SAP with Workday is the overall architecture and integration of the systems. If we start with Workday, Workday is a native software as a service or SaaS cloud-based solution. In other words, the system was built in the cloud, was built as a SaaS solution, and every dollar of R&D that the company has put into the solution is still in effect today. S/4HANA, on the other hand, is sort of a rewrite of old SAP technology that was on-prem. So in many cases, there was a lot of R&D dollars that were spent on the on-prem solutions of SAP like ECC and R3, which are those legacy products. And SAP has spent the last several years migrating that functionality and rewriting it for the cloud. So in many cases, Workday has a leg up on SAP when it comes to architecture because they were built for the cloud from the start. Now, on the other hand, SAP provides more flexible deployment options. In other words, they provide not only a cloud solution, but they also will still provide on-prem, and they also provide a hybrid solution. So for a lot of organizations, that makes more sense because they actually want something other than just a pure cloud or SaaS-based solution, and that's oftentimes what gravitates them towards SAP. Now, keep in mind, a lot of organizations that implement S/4HANA are larger organizations. They're very complex. They've got regulatory requirements. They've got legacy systems that have to remain in place. So they need that sort of flexibility in many cases, and that's what appeals to them about S/4HANA. But for some financial services companies and companies that are just looking at HR and financial technologies, Workday makes more sense because they've got this cloud-based SaaS architecture that is a bit more mature in many cases than S/4HANA's. Now, one thing that's a bit of a wash between these two systems is integration. When you think about how do we integrate to third-party systems, which is better, it's really hard to say because on one hand, Workday you would think might be a little bit more complex because you know you're going to have to integrate with other systems if you're going to look outside the realm of financials and HR. But same with S/4HANA. S/4HANA can be very complex to integrate even within its own modules, and SAP owns other third-party systems that it tries to integrate with S/4HANA. So there's, for example, a procurement system called Ariba, an HR system called SuccessFactors, a time and expense reporting system called Concur. SAP owns all these systems, but they still require integration to the core S/4HANA product. So with all that being said, it's a bit of a wash. You're going to have to do quite a bit of integration, regardless of which system you look at. The only exception would be is if you know you're only going to look at financials and HR, Workday, you may not have to do as much integration, but on the flip side, S/4HANA, you're probably going to have to do a certain amount of integration simply because the product is so broad and so complex. Another factor to consider when comparing Workday and S/4HANA is the overall scalability of the solutions. And when we talk about scalability, there's a couple different ways we can look at it. One is the architecture and the way the technology itself scales. And if we're just looking at technology and the scalability of the technology itself, you might think that Workday has the advantage because it's a SaaS and cloud-based solution. There's not a lot of change that needs to happen to grow into the system. But on the flip side, with S/4HANA, that technology is very broad. It has a lot of different capabilities that you can grow into over time as your needs change and as you expand your business, you diversify your operations. S/4HANA has more scalability from that perspective. So it's sort of a trade-off there between the two definitions of how you might describe or look at scalability. However, I would say that in general, S/4HANA has a bit of an advantage here because of the breadth of capability, but also because the S4 architecture, the S4 database, and the whole architecture that S/4HANA is built on was really meant to scale for large, massive organizations, large computing power, large volumes of transactions. So if you're a large multinational organization, it might be that S/4HANA has more scalability in terms of pure transaction power and just the ability to provide breadth of capabilities as well. When we're comparing S/4HANA to Workday, we also have to look at cost and risk. How much does it cost and how risky is it going to be for us to deploy one of these two solutions? And in general, I would say that S/4HANA is going to be the more complex and the more risky solution. Reason being that it's a large, robust, diverse system that can do a lot of different things. It can be heavily customized. It can be integrated to other systems. SAP provides third-party systems that can bolt on to S/4HANA. And with that comes a lot of complexity. Now, don't get me wrong, it also comes with a lot of potential business value too. There's a lot of potential ROI from doing that, but in general, that's going to be a little bit more risky than if you were to go with something like a Workday. The reason Workday is often perceived to be less complex and less risky is because it's cloud-based. You can't do as much customization, even if you wanted to, with Workday as you can with S/4HANA. And the system itself is fairly narrow or relatively narrow in its capabilities. It only does a handful of things compared to S/4HANA, which can do a lot of different things. So in terms of cost and risk, I'd say that S/4HANA is probably at a disadvantage, but it may be that it's worth taking on that cost and risk if you believe the ROI is there, and if you feel as though you can manage those risks and mitigate those risks effectively, which puts more pressure on you to make sure that you have effective program management. On the flip side, one thing I will point out about Workday from a risk perspective is that change management oftentimes can be difficult because you're forcing the organization to fit into the software more than you might with S/4HANA. Reason being that's cloud-based, it's SaaS-based, and it just doesn't change as easily as you might want it to, which means you have to change your business to fit the technology rather than the other way around. And one other advantage from a cost and risk perspective that Workday actually has is the user interface. The overall usability is generally better than S4HANA. It's a little bit more intuitive. It was built for the cloud. S4HANA is known to be a little bit more complex and trickier to use, although that has changed in recent years with their introduction of Fiori, which is a user interface that's meant to be easier to use than some of the legacy user interfaces they had. But having said that, there's a pretty good trade-off here between the two systems and a balanced set of pros and cons from the perspective of cost and risk. So you may be wondering, which is better, SAP S4HANA or Workday? Unfortunately, the answer depends on what you're looking for. I've tried to provide a good balance here between the pros and cons of both. It depends on the scope of what it is you're looking for. It depends on your ability to change your organization to fit the technology. It depends on your ability to manage risk. It depends on the scope of what functionality you're looking for. So there's a lot of different things you have to consider that I've outlined in this video that will help you get to the right conclusion. We see plenty of SAP S4HANA implementations. We see a lot of Workday implementations as well. Both can succeed or fail. We've seen many cases where either or both are good fits, and we've seen many cases where they're not good fits for the organization. So it just really depends on what it is you're looking for. So it's really important to prioritize what your needs are, really do a deep dive assessment of what those two systems can do, where the deficiencies are of each, and do a balanced assessment.
Okay, so that was our clip of SAP versus Workday and how to determine if either or both of those systems are right for your organization. What were some of your thoughts or follow-up questions from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really great comparison. One thing that really stood out to me was when you were talking about, Workday's cloud native approach versus SAP's flexibility with cloud, on-premise, or hybrid. So with that, do you think that cloud native systems like Workday will eventually dominate the ERP space, or will hybrid solutions like SAP's obviously always continue to have a place?
That's a great question. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I think for really targeted systems, and I would argue Workday is a bit more targeted or a lot more targeted than SAP S4HANA. And when I say targeted, I mean they're focused. They're not SAP S4HANA. It's a big, massive system that can do a lot of different things, a lot of different industries, a lot of different functions, and a lot of different country languages and currencies, all kinds of things like that, which can be really good for a diversified, large organization. But it could be so much complexity that it's hard for those bigger, complex companies that might use S4HANA. It's harder for them to move everything to the cloud, largely because you lose a certain amount of flexibility working from the cloud. But when it comes to something like a Workday, especially how Workday started as an HR technology, that's so targeted, and they became a big juggernaut in the ERP space by focusing on HR technology and doing HR technology better than some of the big ERP providers could. And so that was their niche. That was the weakness they saw in the market, and it worked really well. And then over time, they started to add different capabilities like financials, inventory management, whatnot. So I think for those smaller, more targeted instances, it's easier to move to the cloud. But when you start to broaden that and say, we're going to look across the entire enterprise, across all these different functions and locations and industries and things like that, that's where it becomes harder to move to the cloud, because it's not usually there's a certain amount of complexity or uniqueness that's going to fall into that makes it hard to just adapt to whatever the cloud offering might provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing kind of that we're on comparing, whether you're a large organization or a smaller organization, I want to talk about scalability. And I know you talked about this a little bit. So how SAP's architecture, right, is built for massive organizations with heavy transaction volumes, while Workday offers simple or scalable setups for smaller organizations. But with this, how can companies future-proof their ERP investments to ensure scalability as they grow?
Well, I think first of all, it's impossible, I think, to truly future-proof your organization. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I think it's reasonable to say if we don't know what's going to happen in the future, then it's reasonable to say we're not going to be able to future-proof against the unknown. But I think as far as scalability, though, I mean, I think, one of the underrated parts of scalability is cost effectiveness of your cloud solutions. And if you're overpaying or oversubscribing to cloud systems and it's costing you too much money and it's sucking up resources that you as an organization could be using for growth, for real growth in your business, then to me, that actually defies scalability. Even though the software itself could provide you quote unquote scalability, if in the process it's sucking up your other resources through time and money and maintenance of the software, that undermines that scalability. So I think you have to look at both, not just what can the software scale in terms of its functionality and capabilities, but can the software scale in terms of its cost effectiveness? And by the way, that cost effectiveness might diminish over time, because once you're in the cloud, it's a lot easier for software vendors to add in escalators and kickers to raise the price. So I stand by my comment. I think there'll be a day of reckoning for cloud systems in the near future, in the next few years, where companies are going to start to realize they're overpaying and oversubscribed for some of these technologies, which, to your point, means that they're not getting the scalability that they could or should.
But yeah, that definitely makes sense. Well, it was a great video. I always love when we're comparing systems. I feel like the audience really likes it. And I mean, I think it's nice if you're in that process of choosing between two systems to, get some sort of opinion or a head start on what may be better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to learn more about other systems, whether it's SAP and Workday or other systems that are out there, check out our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. We just released it a couple months ago. It features our top 10 ranking of top 10 ERP systems. It includes a number of other independent reviews and rankings of technologies and best practices and advice for making your digital transformation successful, trends in the industry, other benchmarks and metrics. So be sure to check that out. You can go to the links in the description below, in the description field, or in the show notes below, wherever you're listening or watching to this podcast. Click on that link. You can download it for free on our website. So be sure to check that out. It's the 2025 Digital Transformation Report from Third Stage Consulting, and it's packed full of good stuff. So be sure to check that out. So thank you for another great episode, Darian. Thanks to the audience for being here today. Again, the show is produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. You can find new episodes every Wednesday, as well as past episodes of this podcast, by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So hope you all have a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week on this podcast. Have a great week in the meantime, and we'll see you soon.